at 11:30 this time only, and these are the headlines. A national conference on cinema will bring together professionals and experts to discuss the future of film industry in Algeria. The event aims to implement reforms reviving the industry. France faces mounting turmoil amid internal crises and international controversies. Critics increasingly challenge the government's political choices, urging a shift towards addressing pressing social issues, and a high-profile corruption scandal has rocked the country. Algeria denounces the intentional Zionist attacks on Endaf and UNIFIL and reaffirms that the repeated incursions on Syrian territory is a threat on regional and international peace and security. Welcome back, everyone. Under the aegis of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Ministry of Culture organizes, starting from tomorrow, national cinema sessions aiming to create a roadmap for modern and competitive and globally focused film industry in Algeria. This approach will be put in place by modernizing infrastructure, training talent, and simplifying financing, which the authorities qualify as a priority, given that the cinema is the mirror of the national identity. Najib Tayar.
With a strong focus on developing the structure and high-performance film industry, Algeria has launched several initiatives to boost the sector under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, who is dedicated to supporting the Algerian cinematic talents both locally and internationally. These efforts aim to encourage the national production and meet the expectations of industry professionals. Today we need to move towards profitability, and the second and perhaps most important aspect is to promote Algeria's image abroad. When we think what great films we've made, such as La Bataille d'Alger, which transmits the message of sympathy to Algeria and the Algerian revolution in form of images, I believe that the cinema is a formidable weapon to promote the image of Algeria.
Promouvoir l'image de l'Algérie.
The priorities include modernizing infrastructures, establishing dedicated training facilities, and implementing simplified financing mechanisms to support various films projects. These efforts aim to revitalize the industry by empowering the young talent, providing them with the resources and the opportunities to train and succeed in a competitive cinematic landscape.
كثرت عليكم بالحس تاع الماشينه عنده الحق يزعف بصح غير ما يتقلقش راني كملت سمحي لي العين لا سمحي لي انتي
I
think the day we will have 100 multiplex cinema halls in the country will start to re-establish the self-financing for cinema. Back in the 70s and the 80s, the aid fund was fed by 14% of cinema tax revenues, which was more than enough to produce 10 movies. So if we start with 100 halls, we might reach 300 to 400, at which point the government financing won't be necessary. The spectator would be going to finance the cinema. Organized by the Culture Ministry and under the aegis of the President of the Republic, the national cinema sessions will start tomorrow, in which those reforms will be tackled, through which Algeria seeks not to only reboost its film industry, but also to secure its position on the global cinema scene.
Today, France is undergoing a period of turmoil with internal crises and misconduct in global matters. While the far right continues to ignore the principles it claims to uphold, voices are emerging to criticize the government's political choices and call for a shift in focus towards internal issues as well as the adoption of a respectful foreign policy. Raina Al-Bahri explains.
We don't want a war with Algeria. It's clear. They are our brothers, sisters, our aunts, our grandparents, and our friends. True to his convictions, Jean-Luc Mélenchon firmly reiterates his criticism to French authorities, particularly in matters of international policy, and more specifically those related to Algeria. Mélenchon denounced the irrational and senseless choices of certain members of the government, emphasizing the need for diplomacy based on justice and respect. You are paid to engage in diplomacy. You are paid to understand each other, to listen to each other. There should be no more back and forth. There is a need for discussions. That's enough. No more endless exchanges. Words that reveal the confusion, carelessness, and neglect that seem to be growing in Paris, showing a serious disconnect between some of its leaders and reality. Some are even considering taking harsh actions against Algeria, which shows a worrying shift in politics.
There should be no politics in sports, but it's not that you don't want politics in sport, you just don't want Palestine. When it comes to Palestine, you denounce it as a message of hate, but you were fine when the Boller Stadium showcased the colors of the Ukrainian flag. To put an end to all oppositions to the genocide committed in Gaza, to express themselves, you criminalized it until the Human Rights Committee of the UN denounced instrumentalization of the struggle despite it being legitimate. You used the police services and the judicial system against people guilty for supporting international law. And if you don't show the same strength against organizers of Zionist events, such as the Gala Israelists Forever, even though their managers call for the eradication of Gaza and the extermination of its people and for colonization, it's precisely because you support them, and therefore you are not just passive, you are complicit.
From the French Parliament, David Guiraud, a deputy from France, criticized the government's unconditional support for the Zionist entity. He called this stance hypocritical, saying it ignores basic humanitarian values.
You were silent when our French gendarme, who has a diplomatic status, was arrested by Zionist police in the Yonah region in the occupied territories. You claim to be patriots, yet you allow the Zionists to trample on French sovereignty. Entire France is humiliated when one of our gendarmes is thrown to the ground by a foreign police force.
In his speech, Guiraud challenged certain political leaders, highlighting that France has citizens who are suffering beyond its borders. He called for the focus to shift to urgent domestic issues instead of getting involved in international matters.
What is France? It represents 1/5 of Algeria, a land whose wealth and resources France has long exploited. Today, France no longer holds control over this country.
France is now trapped in a political and diplomatic bend, showing its harsh and arrogant side towards Algeria, both at the state level and among the people through its actions. The extreme right has ignored the values of justice, fraternity, and equality, which it claims to defend.
And France's colonial past in Algeria stands as a profound and lasting scar in the collective memory of the Algerian nation. The very country that claimed to uphold the values of liberty and civilization was in fact the one responsible for perpetrating acts of mass violence, torture and destruction in Algeria. Najah Tayar takes us back in time.
The French occupation of Algeria, starting in 1830, was a brutal attack on the nation's identity, religion and humanity, leaving lasting scars. This period of violence and suffering is often referred to as Algeria's Great Holocaust. Algeria faced thousands of losses, but with honor and glory, and France had victories, but dishonorable victories.
C'est que ces victoires se sont faites dans le déshonneur.
After the fall of Algiers, the commander of the French expedition, Marshal de Beaumont, assigned the butcher Clausel to attack Blida on July 23, 1830, to fight war with crusader hatred and greedy plunder. Nevertheless, the attack was met with valiant resistance from the Beni Menasser, Beni Misra, Beni Khashna, Beni Salah, and Al-Hajjou tribes.
L'objectif, encore une fois, est de détruire.
The goal was to destroy the crucial agricultural and economic infrastructures of the Algerians, and there were practices ordered by high command of the French military, such as burning whole villages and several other criminal acts.
Au fait de mettre le feu à des villages entiers.
The murderer Clausel was defeated by Emir Abdel Qadir in Muqta battle, which turned him to a human monster when he took over Mascar and turned it to ruin stinking of death in 1835. And in 1838, Constantine also faced the same destiny. Its waterfalls turned into blood. 10 years after France's occupation start, Marshal Bugeaud was appointed Governor-General of Algeria and adopted the scorched earth policy. During the 132 years of French colonial rule in Algeria, over 5.6 million martyrs lost their lives as a result of the brutal policies enforced by the occupying forces of France.
And the scandal has shaken the French government, with the Ministry of the Interior now embroiled in controversy. An investigation by the French National Financial Prosecutor's Office has uncovered allegations of corruption, influence peddling and illicit dealings involving questionable contracts and powerful networks. The investigation is still underway, but concerns about the depth of corruption within this institution are growing. Risa Kabesh reports.
The French Interior Ministry is now facing allegations of corruption. The press revealed that an investigation has been opened by the Parquet National Financier, a state judicial institution in charge of tracking economic and financial delinquency. The investigation concerns directly the purchasing service of this ministry, involving military personnel and several business leaders. In fact, the evidence found covers events that goes back to 2022, while a general in charge of orders and distribution for the country's gendarmerie, the police and the civil defense was taken into custody in March 2023 before being suspended from his duties and removed from active service in September of the same year. The scourge of corruption surely found its way within this ministry due to the seriousness of the facts collected so far during the investigation. More can still be found, which raises concerns about the integrity of this institution.
Few hours only separate us from the ceasefire in Gaza to take effect. Since its announcement, the Zionist entity killed more than 120 citizens, including 33 children, and concerns are also on Arwa scheduled to be halted from exercising its humanitarian activities later on this month. Our correspondent Wissam Abu Zaid and Rania Al-Bahri with a picture.
After the closed talks of the UN Security Council, the Algerian efforts to consider the threats facing UNRWA from the Zionist occupation, the Palestinians appreciated the Algerian League, stressing the role of UNRWA and also caring for the displaced in light of the war and the destruction it left behind. The Palestinians described UNRWA as the international institution concerned with the issue of the return of refugees and contributing to the reconstruction, relief, healthcare and education efforts, and that its absence would double the tragedies that befell the Palestinian people in all refugee camps. UNRWA provides relief, health and educational support for the Palestinian people. Without it, we would be in great deficit. The Palestinians expressed their hope that Arab and international efforts would come together to support it after the occupation destroyed more than a third of its buildings and headquarters in Gaza, killed 266 of its employees, and prevented it from bringing the aid through the crossings, undermining its effort, which the Palestinians reject in its entirety. Since the beginning of the Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip, it has been following a scorched earth policy that hasn't spared hospitals, schools or even international institutions.
And Algeria, presiding over the UNSC, strongly condemned the deliberate attacks carried out by the Zionist occupation forces against members of the UNIFIL in Lebanon and Andaf, while calling for an impartial investigation to ensure accountability. In his statement, Ambassador Ammar bin Jama warned against ongoing violations in the areas of operation of UNIFIL and Andaf committed by the occupying forces, describing them as a source of serious concern. He reaffirmed Algeria's unwavering support for these missions and its firm commitment to ensuring ensuring the safety and security of peacekeeping personnel, while highlighting that these attacks are war crimes.
Algeria affirms its unwavering support for these missions to ensure the safety and security of peacekeepers. We recall that the attacks committed against them are considered as war crimes. Therefore, we strongly condemn the deliberate attacks of the Zionist entity against the members of the United Nations in Lebanon and the destruction of its headquarters. We demand impartial investigation and full follow-up.
Benjama also highlighted that the Zionist actions in the buffer zone and repeated incursions into Syrian territory constitute a serious threat, not only to Syria, which is going through a critical phase, but also to regional and international peace and security. In this context, the diplomat called on the UNSC to apply its resolutions and take effective measures to put an end to these actions, stressing that no one is above justice and the law, and that the principle of accountability must be upheld. The diplomat further emphasized that addressing the root causes of the conflict in the region by ending the occupation of all Arab territories is essential to achieving lasting peace in the Middle East.
The Zionist entity's actions in the area of separation and the raids on Syrian territory constitute a severe threat not only on Syria, which is going through a sensitive phase, but also on regional and international security. The Security Council must reaffirm its decisions and act with confidence to put an end to these measures.
And a heartfelt homage was held at the Rashid Makhloufi Memorial in Stif province to honor the legendary Algerian soccer icon who passed away last November at the age of 88. Family members and former teammates attended the moving ceremony celebrating the life and the legacy of a man who profoundly shaped Algerian soccer history both on and off the field. And that was it for the next news. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.